Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Again, depending on what time you're viewing this podcast series, this is what we call Race, Culture, and the Church. Race, culture, and the church. And again, this conversation is centered on that intersection where we talk about issues dealing with race and the culture we have in this community. And we are Christ followers, and we lean into that. We don't shy away from it. And so we look to find that point of conversation in that sweet spot, if you will. This is the 22nd of our series, the 22nd episode of our series, which began the week after the murder of George Floyd. And so I am pleased now to introduce and to have present here Larry Lee, President, CEO, publisher in charge of the Sacramento Observer. Thank you, Larry.
Reverend Meeks, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Please call me Mark. This is a pleasure. You're a busy man, to say the least, and for you to come here and be a part of this conversation, it means a lot. So thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Thanks for thinking of the Observer.
Oh, I'm a subscriber. There we go. Let me just do, by way of introduction, again, our crackerjack exhaustive research committee of me scraped off the Observer website. So if it's wrong, it's your fault.
My fault.
It's your fault. You are a graduate of San Jose State, a Spartan.
Yes, I am. Very good.
School of Journalism, Mass Communications. You were named Distinguished Alumnus by San Jose State in 2006. And in 2019, you had the distinction of being honored as Outstanding Alumnus by Christian Brothers just right down the street from us. The American Society of Newspaper Editors, the NNPA, and the University of Missouri's College of Journalism have also saluted your journalism achievements. You're married, you have 2 daughters. That's full-time in and of itself. And since 2015, you've been the man in charge of the Sacramento Observer.
Yeah.
How have you balanced all of that? How have you kept life going?
Well,
sanely.
I know. By God's grace, for
there
sure.
you go.
So I mean, I always have to. If thankfully you didn't read the entire bio, but if you did read the bio, you would see, intentionally, I start a lot about my journey by bringing my parents into, into my story, because I wouldn't be here without them. And they're such an integral part of the person that I have become, and created such a wonderful environment for me to become that person, and have placed so much into this community that we serve. So I'm nothing without them. They would say they are nothing without their parents, and so the story continues to go and go. And so I think when you ask how do I manage it, how do I balance it, I had terrific role models who were selfless leaders. Bill and Catherine Lee, if you knew them, or even if you didn't know them or knew of them.
I know you, so I had to have known them.
That's right. But they did so much for this community, and sometimes through the pages of the paper, but oftentimes outside of the pages of the paper, by whether it was hiring, whether it was mentoring, financially supporting people, giving voice to the voiceless. All of that stuff was done by them on my watch while I was watching them and saying and observing, what it means to be a selfless leader, or what it means to be to receive and to give, selflessly. And so, when you ask me how do I do it, well, I watch them do it, so I'm going to do the same thing.
So you had to have seen, and I use the word intentionally, sacrifice.
Oh, absolutely.
That they had to make, and it didn't. You didn't run away from it.
No, I didn't. Shame on me. You're right.
You have only you to blame.
I do have only me to blame. I did, because I did see it for sure. Yeah, I mean, I definitely saw sacrifice. They and felt sacrifice, right? I mean, there was times, plenty of times when we did not because we could not. We could not because we had not, right? And so it wasn't. But it wasn't. It was never seen as something that we were left without. It was always kind of this is what we do. We give. If we have an opportunity we work hard and try to pour back into the community that we're called to serve. And so, yeah, I did see that, and yeah, it wasn't something that I did gravitate toward it because there's a lot of nobility in that. There's a lot of pride and in that, and I think that like my parents, I think I was called for this. Right, I'm the youngest of three boys. My oldest brother is deceased. My middle brother was in the entertainment industry, and he's always had a passion for that. And so for me, I grew up around the newspaper, particularly in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, when, the paper was really the nation's best Black newspaper, period. Without, hands down, no discussion, no debate. The work that we were doing at the Observer was second to none. And so I observed that and watched that week in and week out and, had a lot of regard for what my parents were doing. They had an intimate conversation with me when I was about 18, 19 years old about whether or not I thought I was going to come back to the Observer. I think they were debating a couple things. One, should they invest in me to go to college, and if their investment was going to pay off. I also think that they were probably in a moment of time in their own journeys trying to figure out what was going to be this last chapter for them. Or maybe it wasn't last chapter, but one of the last chapters for them to figure out exactly what they were going to do and, were they going to need to start looking at, making, selling the business or something like that. But I, like you said, maybe myself to blame, 18, 19 years old, I was like, yeah, I'm going to come back. And, but I think what that gave me gave me a little bit of purpose, right? And an idea to say, okay, I am in school. And everything that I'm learning is going to hopefully at one day be applied to this, right? And this was the Observer.
And you use, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but I heard it. You use community and service in the same sentence. Knit that together for me. Community service.
Oh gosh. So, I talked about my parents, but it goes before them. So. My grandfather was a Baptist minister, my dad's father. My grandparents on my mom's side, they did a lot of community-related work, particularly here in the Oak Park area. My dad's side of the family is mostly in North Sacramento. Dad went to Grant, mom went to Donner, which is now William Lee College Prep. Wow. So she went there and went to McClatchy as well. And so So when you say community service, so one, I'm a product of our community. I'm a product of Sacramento. Catherine, your assistant, asked me if I was from California, and I proudly said, no, I'm from Sacramento. I am from California, but I'm from Sacramento.
Totally understand.
I'm a complete product of this community, absolutely. And when I talked about my grandparents, there almost is not a week that goes by where someone today doesn't stop me and say, your grandparents are the reasons why I'm a Christian. My grandparents on my dad's side in North Sac, they used to pick up neighborhood kids and take them to church. Back when you could give your kids to somebody, right? Yeah. And take them to church. So so that was part of kind of what the community that they were building. It wasn't nobody paid them, nobody asked them to do it, but it was just what they were doing, right? And so from that, my dad saw that, right? And his brother, my uncle, and they continued to kind of add moisture and water to those seeds that were planted. by people like my grandparents. And so when we talk about community service, it wasn't intentional. I used those terms, but product of this community, and because the community has given to us, we give back.
I appreciate that. Speaking of giving back, the Observer, and again, our Cracker Jack research team here, I'll just read this, quoting again from the Observer site. The Observer has been regarded as the most honored Black newspaper in America, having received more than 700 awards for journalism excellence and community service. 6 times, the Observer has been named the nation's top Black newspaper. And in 2022, you'll celebrate your 60th anniversary.
Yes, we will.
Tell me, how does, one, that's an incredible milestone. 60, just to live, 60 is just a big number, period.
It is a big number, yes.
To be 60 in journalism is big. To be 60 in journalism focused on the African-American, the underserved community, it gets even bigger.
Sure.
Help me understand the significance of that.
It is very significant. If you ask me, it's very significant. So a couple things. So one, we're very fortunate as a community that my parents were at the helms of the Observer for 50 years, right? My dad, at the time of when he stopped working in 2015, had published a newspaper longer than anyone else in California history at 52 years.
Wow.
No one else had ever published,
Wow.
had been a publisher for that long. So we were very fortunate to have the longevity, health and longevity of Bill and Catherine Lee and their desire to maintain the Observer. Sure, did my presence probably in 97 when I came back, did that help, help give them some fuel? Sure, but that's on them, right? I mean, that's an amazing testament. Now, you put me into the mix, and we're very fortunate as a community, I think, and as an organization, to have had 2 generations of folks who are literally committed to this work, right? There's oftentimes you get second generation cupcake makers that don't have the passion that the first cupcake maker had, right? So to have someone who is driven to do excellent work in the work of journalism, news and information, and it's not like I just showed up. I've been here, right? So we're very fortunate to have that. You then go the next step. Mere survival for Black businesses in California is extremely difficult. Mere survival for newsrooms is challenging. We're still in the midst of COVID. During COVID, more than 200 community newspapers have gone out of business. More than 6,000 journalists have lost their jobs.
Right.
The narrative for the Observer is totally different, to be honest. We have struggled mightily for the last 10, 15 years, but we survived. I say oftentimes, God has given us both vision and provision. He's given us the vision. He has allowed us to still be here, and we've been able to grow. And in this period in time that we're in right now, couldn't say the case 3-4 years ago, but in this moment that we're in right now, we're growing. We've tripled the size of our staff.
Wow.
In 2021. I'm sorry, we're 2022 now. In 2021, we tripled the size of our staff. I mentioned, jetting out of here today because we're interviewing people to hire.
Correct.
And so, when you talk about the great fortune that we are having, I think, I know that God has his hand all over our business.
Well,
don't give me. I'm not a preacher. That's what you do.
No, that's what you're doing.
But I can give a testimony.
Well, and please continue. But if I could, as you were speaking, I thinking of Mordecai as he was talking to Esther, and he's like, "Well, you've been placed in this situation for such a time as this.
Right.
What do you give me perspective in terms of both the observer as a oracle, as a I would say microscope, whatever metaphor you want to use, the observer, you're uniquely positioned for such a time as this. Mm-hmm. What is this time?
Wow. You're right. I think what you just said is right. And the observer's not alone. I think the black press in general, right? There's people have spoken death over newspapers and over the black press for decades. This week marks the 195th anniversary of the first black newspaper. It was founded March 1827. Before the end of slavery, we had a black newspaper. And from those roots, you had black newspapers that have spoken truth to power, have advocated on behalf of a community that has often gone unserved and their needs have gone unmet and often been marginalized and brutalized and just completely destroyed in some instances. And so the black press as an entity, as an oracle to our community, its role is as critical today as it was when it was founded. No, we don't have slavery. We're not chattel slavery, but we are a community that has, for generations, gone have been completely underserved, and the disparities that impact our community are tremendous. Whether they're healthcare, whether they're educational, whether they're financial, home ownership. All of these areas that obviously social justice and policing. These areas have impacted the African American community negatively for generations. And there is a moment that we are in right now. As you say, you started this after the killing of George Floyd. There's a different level of awareness from those outside of our community about the plight of our community. And I think that publications like The Observer can help bring perspective, analysis, observation, and insight and sensitivity that others cannot. The Observer specifically, I think, has a very unique role in that message and that mission as well too, because the great thing is that there's a little bit, because we've been here, right? So if we've been here for almost 60 years, it's not like this is new to us, right? It's not like we're not speaking with experience or authority. When we say, blacks are being marginalized because black students are being suspended at alarming rates in Sacramento County, right? So we can say that because we've said for decades we have observed this, and this is something that other people need to pay attention to. Or if there's other health disparities, you've done such tremendous work, and we've tried to stand right alongside you in this effort to make sure our community is healthy during COVID. And so, being able to speak to those conditions of our people is extremely critical. So the Observer is in a unique position in this time, in this moment, to be able to do that. And I do think my role as a second-generation publisher, as a product of this community, as someone who planned to be born here or was born here and plans to die here, that, I leave it all out here. I leave it out. I don't want anything left, right? I want to be able to say that as an organization, we were able to amplify these voices, add perspective, be sensitive, get other people to be aware of our condition. We want nothing different than anybody else.
How do you navigate that space where you are both the oracle and the advocate, or is that something you don't even, as a journalist, you don't? I guess there's an opinion page on any
Sure.
in any newspaper.
Sure.
But for such a time as this,
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Here's the deal: there's a saying. I don't treat everyone equally, but I treat everyone fairly, right? For us as a newsroom, we are not trying to speak negatively upon anyone, but we want to make sure that as a news organization, we are providing truth and justice and equity through our reporting, right? So our reporters, when they go out and do a story, they are looking at how does the story that I'm about to do, how is it going to impact our community? What is a story that might not be getting told? Or who are the voices that need to be a part of this messaging to help add full perspective to an issue, right? So, I mean, historically, we've had non-African Americans working in our newsroom. I just did an interview with a young lady just now who's seeking a position on our team, and she's not African American. She was like, "How do I report on Black issues?" I'm not. And I said, "Look, the goal is for you to be able to do that reporting. If I was a Black reporter, as I have been, and gone into a mainstream newsroom, I was going to have to do reporting that was not focused on African Americans. I was going to have to do reporting on the community that it was serving. The community that we happen to serve are African Americans. So we want everyone that comes through our doors to be able to be sensitive and be aware of the conditions of our people. And so we'll obviously do that. Now, how do we balance being an advocate? And I love your term, oracle. That's the first time I've ever heard that applied to our work. And I love that, and I may steal that.
No pride of authorship here.
I think that we want. Here's what I will say: we try to be fair. We try not to editorialize through our reporters, but we often also know who to make sure we get. Who do we turn to get certain perspective or certain voices, or what data needs to be highlighted that has not been highlighted before? That's part of the work that we have to do.
I would think it's, I'm talking about ministry, it's a heavy lift.
Yeah,
it's easy to, let me just, sorry to interrupt, but it's easy to call balls and strikes. It's another to say, that umpire is out of bounds.
Right, yeah, or that umpire needs glasses.
Yeah.
Let's look at the history of that umpire and see, yeah, I got you. It's a heavy lift, and you mentioned ministry, and I have always said that the work that we do is lock and step with our faith leaders. I think that the work that is required of our faith leaders is great. And all I can say is thank you.
I was going to say, well, welcome to the club. For those who don't subscribe to the Observer, you have, I think, 4 pages of ministerial
absolutely.
information.
Yep.
I'm going to start looking for Larry Lee and the Observer.
No, that's all right. That's okay.
So 50 years under your parents' leadership, last 10 or so under Larry's leadership. So what would you say, you're carrying on the legacy, but now it's Lawrence Lee, carrying it forward. What would you say is the substantive difference between? Is it the issues? Is it the approach? Is it what? Or maybe it's just it's on a continuum and there's really no break.
Well, there's definitely differences. The biggest difference for us and any newsroom that exists today is technology. That's completely changed the game. Completely changed the game. It's not even the same. It's not the same sport that my parents played as it is for us today. And that's okay, but it's definitely different. So, I mean, whereas before, you know, I could talk forever about the challenges of newspapers, but the model that newspapers had is not going to be any longer, right? I print a publication, people subscribe to it, they go to get that publication or we deliver that publication to them and they rely solely on that. Solely relying on newspapers is gone. That ship has sailed. They're going to have the information on their cell phones. They're going to have it, you know, on social media. Wherever they are, there's access to information these days, right? So the game that we're playing now is while we're in the news business, we're also in the audience business. We're in the business of cultivating an audience and making sure that they have access to information where they are and that it's accessible and easy for them to get to. Because these, you know, are the attention span of not just our people, but the attention span of a millennial or a Gen Zer is different than it is for, what am I, Gen X?
Well, yeah, that's the same. Boomers. It's the same in what you would call traditional ministry. It's the same. I told you. You're fighting. Well, I told you. It's like, welcome to the club. Yeah. You're fighting for that attention before, as gerbils, we run off to the next shiny object. Sure. And focus on that. Yeah. To be able to sustain attention on significant issues in this landscape is a challenge.
So that's the significant difference between the observer of my dad's era and the observer of mine. Now, what's similar, right, is the mission, the reporting, the shining a light on our community, the storytelling. All that stuff is still very much the same.
How about the issues?
The issues, unfortunately, are the same. Unfortunately. I hate to say it, but they are still the same.
No better, worse, just the same.
Our condition as a people is better. When my dad started the paper in 1962 with John Cole and Geno Gladden, blacks couldn't live in certain areas in Sacramento. Blacks wouldn't get hired for certain positions. The state capitol didn't have any representation of African Americans. I should say any, but very little representation of African Americans. Poverty was tremendous for African Americans here in Sacramento during that era, during that period of time. We have tremendous wealth now. We have access to capital. We have, and I'm speaking in generalities.
I understand.
Right? We have access to neighborhoods and places. I mean, you know, where we send the paper now, it amazes me, some of the zip codes where we mail the Observer now. I'm like, wow, I didn't know there were black people there. And they may not even be black subscribers. They may be others, but the paper's getting distributed in lots of different places that it would have never been distributed, you know, during his era. So we as a people have progressed tremendously. However, what affects the least of us, to me, affects all of us, right? So when we talk about, you know, sure, we can say over here we've got tremendous wealth, but we also know that, you know, most of our community, it might be one paycheck away from poverty, or that, you know, too many of our kids are on school lunch programs that shouldn't be. You know, so there's a lot of things that are still impacting our community. Policing, unfortunately, has been an issue within our community as long as I know I've been alive. I think of the Oak Park Four and other issues that have impacted, our communities over the years. You had the riots with the Panthers here in Oak Park. Those things, unfortunately, have persisted.
Well, Larry, I haven't even scratched the surface of the things that I need to talk about. So I'm going to do what I've attempted to do with other guests here and extract a promise that you will come back.
I'll come back. Absolutely. You always can count on me.
Well, you got to don't look at caller ID. Just answer the phone and
Just answer when it calls. Yes, I will.
I so appreciate you, and in all sincerity, thank you for all that you do with the Observer.
Thank you.
It
I
is,
appreciate that.
as you well said, it is an extreme struggle with newspapers in general, but to still be standing and on the cusp of celebrating 60 years of service, of ministry to our community. That's a big doggone deal.
I appreciate that. Can I have a little moment of just saying something?
Please do.
I don't want to I don't want to mess up the flow of how your show ends. But I do want to just say this last part. So our newspaper is extremely valuable and very important, and to the part of kind of what's different today. So we still print and produce a wonderful print publication. We think it's second to none. But we, as I mentioned, we're in the audience business, and so making sure that people understand that our news and content is available online is extremely important. They can subscribe to our newsletters. They can follow us on social media. All of that stuff is really important. We have opportunities for people to make financial contributions to help sustain the work that we're doing.
SacObserver.org.
SacObserver.com. SacObserver.com for the website. When you go to the website, you probably get prompted to sign up for a newsletter. If you can, sign up for a newsletter. We send news to people on their to their inbox every day. We send news to people on their cell phones via text messaging, and we and all of our social media is at Sac Observer, whether you're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you might be. So,
and again, I can't. I've said before. I say now. Of late, the fit and the finish of the product, both digitally and printed, is exceptional.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And I am proud to be a subscriber.
Thank you. I'm proud to call you a subscriber, sir, and I thank you for that. We've worked hard, and we continue to work hard, and more stuff is to come.
So I have, again, you will be back.
Yes.
I have another half page of questions that I'd like to run down, but I invite you to continue to follow us here on Race, Culture, and the Church. Larry, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, and thank you for joining us. Thank you.